Vendor compliance policy, introduction, implementation, and improvement. Running a business is one heck of a job, and few people can do it on their own. It is only when several people come together and work directly and indirectly in a unison, then only a business can achieve the projected milestones. If you are a business owner, you know that businesses need to interact with vendors and agencies directly or indirectly. No matter what type of vendor you are interacting with daily, it is crucial to streamline the whole process. Luckily, organizations can come up with a vendor compliance policy, which is a sort of agreement between the organization and the vendors. If your business interacts with vendors continuously, it is the right time for you to know all about the vendor compliance policy. In this episode, we will cover all the subtopics related to coming up with a vendor compliance policy. Therefore, stay tuned until the end. What is vendor compliance policy? Before diving into the main topic, you need to understand what vendor compliance actually means. In simple words, it is the effective management of all the vendors an organization is dealing with at any given point in time by making them comply with an agreement. By doing so, organizations can cut down unnecessary costs, monitor the process, and maintain a smooth workflow in and out the organization. This way, it is easier to maintain not even dozens but a couple of hundreds of vendors as well. In essence, it is all about a productive partnership with the vendors, and it is possible only if there is a compliance policy that both parties agrees upon and follow. Why is vendor compliance necessary? As your business grows further, having a vendor compliance policy becomes even more important. Without an uptight vendor compliance policy, there are only a few choices left for the organization. To stay on the safer side, having a policy becomes not only necessary but mandatory. A vendor compliance policy is necessary for your organization as it helps with sorting out the following things: handling and sorting out improper purchase order numbers and mixed POs, handling the misplacement of orders along with the product substitution without order, handling and sorting out mixed stock keeping units, checking upon delayed and unsuccessful deliveries, dealing with incomplete or partial billing. All the above mentioned things are just a few of the innumerable things that an effective crafted vendor compliance policy keeps at bay. This is why it is the first thing you need to do right now if you don't already have a policy yet. Why is a vendor compliance policy often overlooked? It might come as a surprise to many of you, but a few businesses don't exactly know how the importance of the compliance policy, especially when it comes to reducing unnecessary costs and time wastage. It is important for both product-based and service-based organizations. Early businesses might not consider it important enough in the initial years because the loss is not conspicuous enough. Most organizations realize it too late, long after the damage is done. If you are a young organization, this is your sign to start planning for ideal compliance policy because it paves the way for success in the coming years. What should be included in a vendor compliance policy? While laying the ground foundation for an ideal vendor compliance policy, it is crucial to include and exclude a few things. The best thing about this process is that there is no ideal compliance policy, and organizations can tailor it according to their requirements. In general, there are a few things that your vendor compliance policy should be comprised of. An overview of the business, including the USP, brand identity requirement, expectations, and so on. Other things include service standards, penalties, delivery timing, product condition and packaging, supply chain requirements, labeling, and so on. Apart from that, the compliance policy should also mention a few areas of concern for the business and the challenges as well. To ensure every vendor is following the compliance policy, it is encouraged to introduce penalties if the procedures are not followed. Having penalties maximize the chance of vendor following the laid rules, thereby improving the efficiency of any task. Other things to keep in mind while working on a policy are to keep it precise, to the point, understandable, and formal. The importance of vendor compliance in any business. The two most important things for businesses these days are efficiency and cost reduction. Both of them are well managed with the help of a vendor compliance policy. It not only helps in solving conflicts in and out of the organization, but also it eases things like standardization, meeting deadlines, workflow, and so on. The ultimate goal is to make them responsible for the products or services they offer and the errors they make in between. Without a vendor compliance policy, none of that is possible at a large scale. How to come up with an ideal vendor compliance policy? A well-crafted vendor compliance policy is one thing, and all the background activity that goes behind making such policy is another. The final product reveals the amount of hard work put into the process. It's not just the mutual agreement between the vendor and the retailer, but goes beyond that. For organizations that are yet to develop a workable compliance policy, it is important to consider things like chargebacks, negotiations, rooms for errors, etc. In this section, you will know the essential components that constitute an ideal policy. Essentially, you have to consider these 9 practices before diving into the whole policy staff. Gather up the concerned department for policy development. Policy development is not easy. It needs a group of people ranging from several stakeholders like inventory control personnel, merchants, accounting personnel, decision-making personnel, and so on. These people are experts in their respective fields and give valuable insights that are crucial during policy development. Fix non-compliance costs to the company. After that, it is a general practice to agree upon the cost of non-compliance that vendors have to pay if they don't obey the policy strictly. The role of accounting is crucial in this step. Some examples of non-compliance might include, but not limited to, unsuccessful sales, delayed processing, product substitution, packaging and marketing, increased freight costs, glitches in EDI and processing paperwork and accounting. Emphasize the bigger picture when implementing anything. It is the best practice to take a look at the bigger picture. This gives a rough idea related to achievement maximum benefits, efficiency, and error-free tasks. At the same time, it's not favorable to enforce the policy in one go. Focus on the large picture and take little steps towards the ultimate goal, maximum output from the vendor-retailer partnership. Identify and evaluate your vendors. This is a no-brainer. Evaluating vendors is something every organization do before selecting them for a long-term partnership. Ideally, you should develop an evaluation checklist for your vendor to check the following. Who is the most valuable vendor for your organization at the moment? Who is the most inconsistent or problematic vendor at any given time? Also consider other factors like speed, efficiency, vendor size, and so on. It is often encouraged to create a vendor scorecard for future reference and analyze your vendors without any prejudices. Make changes in the supply chain. Inducing changes in the supply chain means pushing vendors to follow vendor compliance. This helps them handle things like procedures, use barcodes, source marking, and quality inspection altogether. Consider dropshipping. Dropshipping is gaining the momentum it deserves at present. Here, a business does not have to worry about storing the supplies as the vendor directly delivers them to the customers. This saves time and considerable space. This is why dropshipping is the modern solution that should have a place in your vendor compliance policy. Devise a vendor portal for related activities. There should be a place where all of the things, the policies, the vendor data, the purchase orders, etc. are accessible. Make vendor compliance policy mandatory for business proceedings. There are chances of a few vendors not being willing to follow the regulations mentioned in the compliance policy. For such vendors, make the following vendor compliance policy mandatory for doing business with your organization. Vendor chargebacks for not following the rules. In case vendors fail to abide by the rules, your organization must have a set of chargeback fees to be paid by them. Once the money is involved, vendors will do their best to minimize those errors and deliver the expected work. It is time to analyze in detail the different stages of vendor compliance programs. The 10 steps of vendor compliance as a whole. The vendor compliance policy might seem a little complicated, especially to people who are new in this. Therefore, to make it easier, the whole process has been divided into 10 sections. All of them play an important role in making foolproof compliance policy. What are these 10 stages? Let's understand them one by one. Denial. It is a general trend for people to show distrust when something new shows up. The same is true in case of a new policy. It starts with top-tier employees and decimates from there. The company is thinking of two things to reduce cost and not look forward to a vendor compliance policy because it's too much work. Conception. At this stage, some of the top-tier employees become vigilant after experiences the truth with the help of statistics. This step comes after their frustration over recurrent problems at the vendor's end. Such problems are small but have a huge impact on the overall profit of the company. Creation. At this stage, the inception of listing out problems takes place manually. Employees list out the concurrent problems. Who is held responsible for such problems? What sort of chargeback should we pass on the vendors? And so on. Chargebacks are essential because they offset one or a few of the hidden costs. Excitement. The excitement stage comes when the company witnesses an influx of chargeback, especially in the finance department. At this point, however, the company is not committed to a rigid compliance policy and is still under trial and error domain. There is no significant tech support at this point as it is done at a smaller scale. Hope. After the excitement stage, less behavioral change is observed among the vendors because of continuous non-compliance. Nothing positive is projected to be seen without taking the compliance policy to the next level. Please note that at this point, the company does not have functional compliance policy and is yet to be implemented. At this stage, the policymakers come with better chargeback and penalty documentation. Acceptance. At this stage, not only the finance personnel, but the regular employees too start embracing the newly introduced compliance policy. Everyone has shown a green flag to its implementation within the organization, and it has already starts off setting losses. Anger. This stage is characterized by some disturbances that get in the way of smooth workflow. All of this creates tension between the departments dealing with vendors directly. The whole structure is disrupted due to ignorance from IT and the administration department. Since a business does not only deal with vendors, it is safe to say that lack of attention in the initial stages is something to be worried about. Reflection. At this reflection stage, the company realizes that it is dysfunctional because of the lack of support and needs proper attention to address the whole issue maintenance. Because of lack of support, no one gives enough attention to solving real problems. This leads to a recurring rate of problems like late shipments, subscriptions, below average fill rates, and so on. But these problems are solved quickly, and the authorities dealing with these problems don't even realize the amount of money lost in all of this. Failure. Last and the least favorite stage out of the 10 is the failure stage. This happens when a company loses focus, and in doing so, the purpose of the whole compliance policy is lost. In continuation, the expenses are cut, and without proper guidance, the whole program dies. Failure is destined if enough attention is not given. But don't worry, if you do it right, this stage won't come at all. Conclusion. Dealing with vendors is an inherent part of several businesses around the world. To make the most out of the retailer-vendor partnership, having a vendor compliance policy is a must. In this episode, we covered that vendor compliance is how it can be implemented and its stages. Now that you know all about it, what's stopping you from implementing it in your company and saving millions of dollars every year? That's all for today's episode. Links to everything will be in the description below. If you like our content, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. It will notify you about our new content that we share with you every week. This will help us to produce great content for our professional audience. Let us know if there is something that you want us to discuss in future episodes. Please click the link in the show notes and you can submit your questions directly to me. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.